Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Velocity 360 React Redux Intro tutorial series. In this series, we're going to create an application that makes an API request to Foursquare and then renders the data on a list based on a zip code that you enter to see nearby places, nearby restaurants or shopping stores or clothing stores, things like that. So this is going to be a React Redux only series. There's not going to be any backend integration, no server integration or anything of that sort. So this is good for people who have some backend knowledge, but not so much any React experience. So let's get started. So let's see here. Okay. Okay, first thing you want to do is open up your terminal and cd to your work directory. And then let's create a new project, call it venue search. And then we want to create a new node project using npm. And the -y means use all the defaults. So first thing we need to do is install a series of modules, obviously React, because it's a React project. And then we also need React DOM. Then we need something called Webpack. Now, if this is your first time, then you also need Webpack installed globally to run the Webpack compile scripts. So you need to install it like this. Actually, you're going to need sudo. Then it's going to ask you for your password. Just type in your password and let it go, and you're installing Webpack on your computer, your machine, so that that'll be what runs the actual Webpack scripts. Okay, after that we need a few Babel script modules. Okay, after this, one more to go, and then we should be good to start. Okay, and that's the last one. So once that's done, we should do some setup. So we want to create an index HTML so that we have a sort of a canvas to show our work, to actually render the results. And then let's also create a Webpack config file so that Webpack knows what to run. So first thing we want to do is set up the Webpack config. So that's, whoops, let me just close out some other work here, and then open up your code, and then go to your Webpack config, and then let's set up the config file. In this file, basically what we're doing is we're telling Webpack how to compile our React code. And what does that mean? So React is written, or we're going to write it in what's called ES6, or ECMAScript 2015, which is a somewhat newer version of JavaScript, which not every browser can run right now. So what we need to do is compile the code back down into ES5, so that the most universal version of JavaScript, so that any browser can run it. So that's what we're doing right now. Okay, so we're going to write some more. We're only about halfway done with the Webpack config, but this is the most important part. What we're saying here is that our React code will begin in this file right here, and that's going to be our source code, or what's called our entry point, and that's going to be written in ES6. So this code right here will have to be transpiled into ES5, and Babel is what's going to do that for us. But then we have to tell Webpack and Babel where to put the results. So that's this right here. This is going to be the actual output file of the transpile process. So this will be the actual code that is run in our browser rather than this code right here. So these are the most important sequences so far. We have to do a couple more things. Okay, so here basically is what we're telling, where we're telling Webpack what transpiler to use. So this isn't really, it's important obviously, but it's not as important to understand as what we're doing over here, because over here is where we're telling where to find the source code, and then where to put the results. The reason I'm not emphasizing this side as much is because it's pretty much boilerplate code. You're essentially going to do the same thing here every time, or almost every time, whereas here, the top half, it'll vary essentially project to project. The most important line right now is line 7, which is where we tell Webpack where to find our source code. You may have realized by now this doesn't exist yet, so we have to create that right now. So go back to your terminal and create the src directory, cd into it, create the app.js file, and that is this file right here that we're referencing. And then let's open that up and let's start writing our React code. So here is where our React project truly begins. So right now this is ES6 by the way, and we're going to create a simple React component. We also need the React DOM. Okay, so here's basically the most simple React component possible. So what are we doing here? We're defining a small piece of code that has a visual result right here. And this looks like HTML. It fundamentally is HTML, but what we're doing is we're wrapping this HTML inside of a class called app, what's called a component. So what we want to do is render the component inside of our browser, and that in turn will render this HTML. So what we need to do now is set up the browser to render this. So before we get to that though, I want to run the config, the Webpack really quick, just to make sure we set everything up properly. So you want to go back to your terminal and go back to your root level directory, top project level, and type the following, webpack-w. And right here, it's saying cannot resolve src.app. So what I did was I mistakenly set the file path to a non-relative file path. It should be like this. So excuse me for that. So line 7 here was my mistake. So if you were following along, that means you have that too. So then go back here and type it again. And we wait until we see this. And then if you watch closely, you'll see that this file, this directory just popped up. Well, this is the compiled code of what we just wrote. So that's good. Everything worked. So now we can go into the index.html and start setting up the HTML to render that code. Okay, so how does this work? So if you go back to your app.js, you'll see on the last line we created we referenced the document get element by ID root. So what that means is wherever we render this code, it's going to find the div tag with the root ID. It's going to take that over, and then it's going to insert the contents of the app component, which will just render this HTML right here. So we need to create that div tag, the ID of root. And then last but not least, we need to import the actual React code. So that's just a JavaScript import. And notice how we reference the build bundle, the bundle from the build directory, not the app.js. Because once again, the browser doesn't read ES6, or most of them don't. So we have to compile it to ES5, which goes into the bundle. And this is the code that runs in here, which is simply a compiled version of this. So now we should be able to go back to here and open up the index.html. And hopefully we see this. That means everything worked. We are now looking at this right here. Everything worked. The compilation worked. The imports worked. Our setup is good to go, and now we're ready to begin actually cranking out the main code of this project. So follow along for that in video 2. But if you didn't get this part working, go back to video 1, this current video, and do it all again. Make sure that you cover all the steps accurately, and that you can do it from memory, kind of like I did right now. So that's it, and catch you in video 2. Thanks.